Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 185 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Okay, I'm going to try to put this together and make it rational, okay? We already set our points on the stone, okay? We developed those points by using the foundation points that we use to point onto the stone. And so then we pointed one reference to this side, to this nipple. And then this one over here, which is near the same point, we're right in the same point. They're offset, which is the way I was trained. And then the top point is on the center line of the stone. And the center line of the figure goes up and it mounts in and it clips right in. It's so nice. That's just great. See how it just kind of wiggles? It's right in one place. It's not going anywhere. That's great. And so we should be able to hang our pointing machine on the stone. And it won't fall off. Because your pointing machine will fall off if you're not careful. And you don't want that because you don't want to damage your pointing machine. Okay, but see that's very plumb. When I say plumb, it's most important that it's plumb in terms of front-back attitude as opposed to right-left. It's got just a little bit of tip to it, but that's because of probably more than anything, me drilling these holes and just taking broom and drilling them instead of drilling them on like taking my drill press and making sure they're perfectly 90 degrees. So this is great. Now we have to establish these points on here. The top of this stone, back to that center line, is 8 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's what it's supposed to be, okay? Now, remember that this is supposed to be an 8-inch die, okay? So that's 8 inches. And then to the front is the same 8 inches. Okay, so if I measure back to the back of her head to 8 inches, it goes to this mark right here, this face. This is 8 inches. But our plan is to go 2 inches deeper to give her head more relief because this is slightly foreshortened, okay? That's full round. Okay, and I've done projects like this before, and that's why I did this, because I can marry the full round aspect with the slightly foreshortened and produce a very good figure that looks more lifelike than something that's flattened, because with her head being revealed as a full round piece, if you flattened her head, you'd see it, okay, because it's exposed. So by looking at this, her head, the back of her head goes into this 8-inch portion. I mean, into this last 2 inches. It goes through there. So we've got to figure where her head is, because her head is 8 inches. Okay, and it goes right to the back of this. And so her head's going to be forward a little bit, but if this is 2 inches and her head goes back, then her head's going to stick forward 8 inches. And say she's, okay, say it doesn't touch until down here in the middle of her head, where this crown comes back. So we've got 8 inches there, and that's still going to be 2 inches back. Okay, if this is 8 inches and that goes to the back, and she's right at a little over 8, then this is going to be 1.5 inches deep. That should make up to provide enough stone for her hand. That's why I want to be able to do this, because if we go straight up here, this should be this distance back to the tip of her nose. And see, that's just about 2 inches. So that's pretty close. We're pretty good on that. And I can have her be forward a little bit. The biggest thing we've got to understand is where these high points hit. And her hand, this is going to be the high point. Okay? We've got room on here. Let's see where we put that. We've got room on here for her hand to be right on the surface, right here. Okay? We can put her wherever we want in the stone. Move her up, down, left, right, rotate her, whatever. All by a matter of how we install these points. And how the pointing machine sits on here. Because if the pointing machine sits on here, and just say for instance, we were going to put a screw in here, and we had the screw that stuck way up here. Okay, when we carve her, that will shift her down. Okay, and that will change where we place her. So we've got total control over what we do. This is the hard part to explain. So in some ways you just got to be quiet and listen and do what I do, and not try to think through it. It's somewhat like algebra and you know, advanced math and whatever, and you try to think about all the things that impact it, and you get confused and you can't just relax and see what's there. We've got to go through and establish our high points, okay? And we've got a high point here on her hand, and we've got a high point on her top of her head. We can't go any taller than the top of the stone, okay? And we can't go any more forward than the front of the stone. But all the rest of this is back, and the goal is to have this be at the top, be at the face of the stone, and then have her head be back a little bit, like she's back. We don't want her head protruding like this and hanging over. Sometimes people cut stones like that and it looks weird, okay? But we want, see, if I put my hand over my chest and I've got my hand flexed to where my knuckles are, that's, you know, even with my fat belly, that's pretty much the high point. If I didn't have this sticking out, that would be the high point, okay? That's what we're trying to achieve with this. So, what we're going to do, I'm going to work on making a piece to, this is fully attached, this isn't moving, okay? We're going to make a piece that rests on this, that's there, that has a couple of points here to receive the pointing machine, okay? As well as my screw that I'm going to put along the center line, which is, you know, roughly up through the, you know, the inner edge of her eye, up through there like it is on the model. And we're going to set this up to where these points and that point allow me to carve her hair right to the very top of the stone. And then we can drop it down and put our points here on the armature to make this exactly right. And once we do that, we'll have to put this in a way that we can modify it if we need to. And see, this is right bumping on this. See, if I wanted to flatten that off, I could, but I don't think I'm going to need to. I think I've got enough room there. We'll see. And then we've got to look at our high points. Once we have some preliminary points on this, before we really make a commitment, we have to take a couple measurements like on her knuckles and on this sleeve, because they need to be, this is supposed to be where the sleeve is, and then this cuff in her hand. These are right near the surface, okay? But the hand should protrude a little bit and actually be above that. And so we have to make sure that that's right. If we get this right and we get the height right, then we should have our attitude pretty good, okay? But we may have to adjust it. So I'm going to do some figuring, and I'll come back as I need to try to show you what I'm doing, because you've got to be able to think about this in the relationship of 3 dimensions. That's why I was saying it's easy to adjust the length of these, to rotate, that will turn the top. It's easy to sink this to bring her forward or to push this, to push her back, if we make these longer or shorter or differential on length. So I'm gonna make sure these are nice and tight, and I'm gonna start looking at what kind of attachments I need. I'm gonna try to find some really long screws. I like to use screws for these because I've got screws to put in here. We can put wood in here and put screws and replace that a million times, no big deal. The bigger problem is doing this up top and making sure that what I put in here is on the center line and it's secure. And if you put a screw in there, it needs to be like on this where it's off center, it's got to be pretty long. And you can, we do screws with regular plaster, and you have to plaster them in place, and the problem is the plaster's not very strong. And so it's better if you can use a stronger material like this hydrocal to get it better secured, and then to have a long screw so you got a lot of room and you got all those threads. And so once you put it in there and drill a hole that's nearly the size so the threads can cut, and then you can adjust your height to where you want it to be and make it work. I don't know, there's not a real easy way to describe all this. I'm going to try to show you all I can. So let's see what I can figure out. As I'm obsessing over this, okay, I can't trust that this is square. I mean that this is flat to the ground because it tips up and it probably has some tip to it. But I can take my square, see if I can turn it, to put this on here, okay, and get it to where it looks reasonably straight up and down. And I can measure into her nose, and this says 2.5, okay? If I measure to the back of her head, it's 10, okay? It goes right exactly to 34 inches, okay? So that means that she'll fit in there just like that model. Okay, does that make sense? Because we got that 2-inch back alcove, little niche where she's standing in an opening that's depressed in the stone, like she's coming out of a grotto or something. Okay, so I know that if I have approximately this tall, you know, if I go up that angle right there and this is raised 1/8 of an inch at the end here. If I set this up with that perspective, with that being at 2.5, and that takes it right to 10 inches, that's great. Okay, so I know that this will fit. So now I've got to plan on, you know, I know where this is 1/8 of an inch. So I've got that figured out. Now we've got to set the pointing machine up in order to get it where we want it to be, and realize that if we don't set it in the right place, it will shift this part of, this will index in the wrong place. That's why we wanted to go with the nipples and that line on the middle on the straight line. So now I've got to very carefully, I'm gonna get my straight edge and I'm gonna put a center line on here. There's different ways of doing this. One way that works really good, if you do it when it is daylight, it's bright out, and you can literally put a board up here and put a light behind it. You can put a shadow line and you can manipulate it and move it, and you can put a perfect shadow line up through, and then you can describe the end of the shadow line. It's one of the easiest ways to do it. Otherwise, it's going to just be sketched on. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sketch it on and try to look at it as well as I possibly can, and I'm going to sketch it on with a very sharp red pencil, and I'm going to sketch it on very lightly at first because I don't need a big hard line. But I'm going to go through the middle of her collar, right up her face, and that's going to let me know where I'm going to end up putting this point here, okay? So I'm going to try to do that. I don't know that I'm going to do it on camera because It's just gonna be an estimation. I'm gonna get a longer straight edge and try to hold it up here, and then I'll compare that to the stone, okay? And see where you want it to be. Because we can make this as perfect or as imperfect as we want. And see this, if you hold this up versus, yeah, see that's, look at it from 2 or 3 places. And that literally goes right up. If you go by this V, and then upper neck, it does go right through the corner of her eye, right where it's supposed to go. And the bigger thing is to get it transferred up over the top, because if we have it go one way or the other, it will turn her, okay? So now we've got our line that's and you'll end up having sometimes you'll have a little bit of wander. So if you trace it from the other side, it'll sort of have like a balloon in it. But we're still good on our top line. And so now we know that from 8 inches back, the back of her head is 10 inches, okay? If we go back here, this is 10 inches. And so if we come forward, we can take a caliper and measure, put this on our front, or this other one, to measure how far back from the face of that die, because this represents the face of that die, and have that at 8 inches. We can go back on this line and take a caliper here, and we should be able to check that, and then, take a caliper from the front and then put that back, and we'll know where to put our screw on the top. Does that make sense? And before we commit to anything, I'll proof it on the model. I'll try to take some measurements there to see approximately, make sure that her face is where I want it to be and everything. And we'll do that and check this out. Took my calipers and took a measurement from the front to the back, okay, to the face of the stone. All right. Now I need to know from this front line how far back to go here. I took a pair of straight edges and I clamped them together, okay? So I've got my square armature. I know that this needs to be 1/8 of an inch at the edge here. And so I got that all adjusted, and then I could put this right on the center line. And I know exactly where to measure. Take my caliper, go along here to measure to see where I have to drop. And I've already tried to mark this a little bit. And then I'll lose my pencil. So I'll mark this, I'll drop this down, and I'll drill a hole right there. There's my pencil. That was right there. Mark this, check my line, and then I can drop straight down from that. To where my screw needs to go, where my nail will go. I'll mark a square right there. And it's really important that you double check and triple check this over and over again before you commit. Okay, so we know where that is now. So now I've got to, and that still looks good. So now what I need to do, I need to make sure how the pointing machine sets on there. Because it's going to set right about here. And depending on how close to the vertical this is, try to make it like the job. This is right down at the edge of this wood, which is fine as long as it clears. It's okay. I don't think I'll have to rework it. Now I've got to, I went and got, and then I set it down. I went and got the longest screw I've got. I got some 3-inch screws. I'm going to drill a hole here in her head to put that screw in and screw it down in and adjust it up to where it's basically flush with the top of the stone. And then after everything's all settled, I'll probably put some hydrocal on there to stabilize it. But I'm trusting the threads to do more stabilizing than the plaster, because we're going to be on and off that a lot. And so I'll mount that up really well around it to make a good surround. We got to make a couple of points here. But before we do that, I want to put something on here to simulate that point, okay? And I'm probably going to get a piece of wood and shave it down and try to hook it on here where I like it. Has something pretty solid right there before I go drilling a mess of holes. Get that on solid, and then we're going to put this on without causing a disaster. We'll set this on here to look at our preliminary mounts for these lower 2 points, and then I'll have to point to this hand. I'll take some measurements to make sure, because if that hand is on the surface, if that's on the very face, then I should be able to point to it with my pointing machine. I don't know exactly where it is in terms of the model right now. I'm just doing this as an example. That hand, we should be able to take a point, because that's a high point, that makes sense. And I'll set my pointing machine to that point. And it should match. This point that's on the face should be on the face. And if there's a disparity, there's a big difference, I've got to fix that. And I'll fix that by how I place her. I may have to move these points in more to bring her forward, or I may have to move the points out to push her back, because it should match up and be like right on the money. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm gonna do a little bit of this work, and then I'll be back. Makes a lot more sense to do this down on the floor, but that's not how I got this all put together. Now, if you've got something that you aren't able to drill into, you may have a model that you have to like glue or attach pads to. And I'll leave that up to you. You've got to not be an idiot. Do something that's permanent, but you got to do something that's rugged enough that it'll stay there. And drilling this is got to be kind of careful. And when you go in with your screw, you got to be careful as well, because you can force it and it'll break, or you'll strip it out and then you lose the benefit of having a screw in the first place. Okay, I got to get a screwdriver. Just work your way down in careful. If it gets real tight, back it out and clean it, okay? Because the last thing you want to do is force it and blow a big chunk off her head, because that will happen, and that is not a happy feeling. I'm going to go in and out 2 or 3 times and I'll be back. I've got that screw and it's still just a tiny bit high. Let's see if I can go down just a little bit more. Ideally, I want it to be flush. And remember, we've got the little divot as well cut into the stone. So let's see how this fits. And remember, we're slightly tilted here. And so if we can keep that same attitude here between these points on the bottom, that will keep her in the same relative position. And that's pretty good right there. If we're there with our screws, let's see if we can set this up here just to get an approximate. And this is kind of a juggling act. You sort of have to play with this a little bit to make it work. And so we've got this set, and I'm holding this where it looks like it should be. We'll lift this off and then go over here and see. And that's like a perfect fit. Well, I don't know how to, that will put that point that I just measured, which is, if I go till that touches, and this is actually a little bit low, okay? Which means this is a little bit high, which is good. We're back just a little bit further than we need to be, but we can deal with that. I'm gonna trim, I'm probably gonna end up trimming out, because my nut is hitting the board right here. And I don't know that it's really gonna be a problem, but I'm gonna clean it out just so that it doesn't hit. So I'm gonna go find some material to put in here to mount my screws and get that set up really well. But this is looking really, really good. This is like right where it needs to be. And by having this is just not quite touching right now. So, and for this to be, this was lower than this. There's a little bit of a gap because I'm moving around. I'm gonna go find some material to put in here to block this in. Even if I have to glue this in and let it set, so I got a really good foundation. I'm gonna cut a notch out over here for my nut to clear, because I don't like the way that's hitting. While you're making your adjustments, okay, and you're setting this up, get your pieces in place. I also went ahead and measured the distance that this hole is from my center. It's right at 3 3/4. And it's real easy to do that one. That one just, and that's where I'm running into, it's bumping on my plate. So I carried my center line down onto my plant here and measured over 3 1/4 and struck a line, put a line on with my red pencil. Now I know exactly where that point's supposed to be in terms of having this tip one way or the other, having it go back and forth, okay? And so I can get that right where it needs to be. Then I can take my point and I can compare it to the stone. And right now, I've got to take stone off here, okay? Remember I said, don't surrender volume. So I don't want to take off too much. I have got a little bit on the sleeve where I've already started it, and it was just below the face. And so I've got to play with that and see, but by moving these forward just a tiny bit, and that's the benefit, because this goes in, this is deeper than it should be. And so by coming forward just a tiny bit, then I can come over and check this. That's the big benefit of putting screws in as opposed to putting nails that aren't as easy to move. Then I can take and check that, and by bringing those forward, I'm still not quite there, okay? Because this has to be here. These would have to be forward quite a bit. If I touch that, I can get it all set. So you just have to go back and forth and play with your distances to get everything the way you want it to be before you commit these screws. Now what I think I'm going to do, see, I can go down just a little bit more with that. And I'm right there. So what I'm going to do with these screws, with these blocks, is I'm going to glue them to this. You'll learn that glue, I got to make sure this has got to be trimmed because it's on a screw and I'm going to take it apart. I never used to think that wood glue was the monster that it is. And now I know that wood glue is way stronger than the nails. It's like permanent. And so I'll put these on here and clamp them down and I'll glue them. And I think I'm going to go try to wrap up that little camellia model real quick, to sketch that together to get some scale and let this dry. And then I'll drill it and I'll put screws in there and I can adjust the screws to exactly where I want. Now by having 2x4 material in here, and I can drill it, that means I could drill a hole out just like I did on top of this to be able to have more adjustment, and I've still got all that mass and that reinforcement, and so it'll work pretty well. But I'm going to do that, and I think I'm going to just take a rasp and relieve this just a little bit so it's got a perfect place for it to go in. But that's really good, and I can set this up to be just the way I want it. and have my agreements really, really well. And have that's pretty vertical right there in terms of her. It's not hanging out or going in, and that's the way it is on the stone, so this will be really good. And then we'll just be able to carve. And you just have to make sure that you don't have something protruding from that would be above the stone. You're better to have it below the face of the stone. So you just check this a whole bunch of times before you start to get all of your models synced with the stone. Now, if you got a great big rough piece of stone, you still sort of need to have a concept where your high points are versus a nice flat piece that's easy to reference, because you've got to place this in the stone. And the danger is that you'll carve something and she may have a feature, some element that's protruding, and you set it all up, and all of a sudden you realize that you need another inch of stone to carve that detail in the middle of the job, and you got to fix it. So I'll be able to do that, but by measuring this over to the side, I understand I've got this in the right attitude, and by having her pretty good, I know and I look at this and my stone is good here, I'm all set, and everything else, there should be plenty of stone because this is forward of everything, and I should be able to really lay into her. And well, I'm gonna go find the wood glue. I'm gonna glue this in place. Always buy your glue in a big jug, keep it in the house or wherever it won't freeze. And even if you got to buy a container, you know, a regular glue bottle, a small one to start with. So you got a dispenser, but then use a regular one like this, get a big jug and keep the glue dispenser rinsed out, and you'll save a ton of money because you can buy a whole gallon for what the cost of one or two of those little things are. And once you start gluing stuff, you won't stop. Okay, I try to move the camera so we can see. It's really difficult to get close up and back up enough so you can see everything, but close up enough so you can see details. And because I can't just go back and do it again. I wish I could make 40 takes, but this I can't. I've got this point machine set. It's set up to take a measurement on the front of her hand, and I've got the glue has dried, you know, magic of video. And now we'll check this, we'll lift this off and check it over here on the job. Let's see if it, see how it looks. It should be, yeah, see, I've got a 1/16 of an inch of stone over here. You know, I got maybe an 1/8. Can you see how, that's how much stone I've got right there. So I'm pretty happy. I'm gonna drill these, I'm gonna mark these, put this on here. Set it in place. I'm gonna mark these. And now I'm going to drill it and put the screws in. Got some screws that I've ground the heads out. Where's the camera thing? Right there. See, I've taken and put a little abrasive bit in the middle and opened them up so they'll receive the point machine. But they're hard to drive, so put a regular screw. Run them in and out a few times, and usually you can still get just enough bite on them to get them where you need them to be. Now my point machine should right up. Yep, and that's good. Now, you got to make sure it fits in there. These are perfect fit. Seeing if I go too far, it hits on this crate. So I'm going to end up putting a stop up here. to where it can only turn so much, and it can't turn and go too far back, and then I won't bugger my point machine. But this is really good. So if I go on here and get it all set this on her hand, and I go over here, set my point machine and run it, boy, it is perfect. It is like perfect right now. That high point on her hand is perfectly on the face of this stone. Bam. All right, so these are in the right place. Everything. This is set up fantastic. So this high point on her hand is going to be the very face of the die, the very face of the job, and we're going for it. All right. The only thing I've got left is I got to put a little bit of plaster on the top of this screw, and it'll be done. But the point machine is completely set up. We're all set. See that? There's nothing. I can't push it in anymore. Yeah, worked out good. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship here at Carolina Sculpture Studio. Thanks for coming in.